Welcome to lesson 2 of the rivers topic for paper 2. This is the long profile of a river. Please write the title and copy the keywords in the box. Please pause the video and write the answers to this Connect quiz. Please check and correct your answers. Give yourselves a mark out of 10. In the last lesson, we identified the features of a drainage basin, and then we explored the drainage basin system. In this lesson, we want to understand how and why the characteristics of a river and its drainage basin change as we progress from the source in the upper course, downstream to the middle course, finally arriving at the lower course where the mouth meets the sea. So if the last video looked at the features of a drainage basin and what you find in the drainage basin of a river, this talks about the long profile of a river. So if you imagine that you cut through the land and you're looking sideways, what does the river look like and how does it change? This explains how it changes as you go from the source downstream to the mouth, as you go from the upper to the middle to the lower course. So what we need to do is pause the video and get your page. You need about half a page. You need to get it to look something like this. You might want to turn your page landscape if that helps. Once you've got your page looking like this, we're going to go through it step by step. So at the upper course of the river, where you find the source, the river starts off very high up. The gradient, which is how steep or flat the land is, how steep or flat the relief is, which relief means the shape of the land, the gradient is very steep. As you go further downstream, the gradient starts to become more gentle. Just like your basin in the bathroom, the edges around the top of the basin are very, very steep, and it becomes increasingly gentle as you go down. So it now starts to flatten out a bit. And then finally, when we get to the lower course of the river, the land is almost flat. Okay, so we start off steep, the gradient becomes gentle, and then once you're in the lower course of the river, it's almost flat. The next thing we're going to do is talk about the river channel. So the river channel is the actual part of the river that the water flows through. So this is why we've got 3 boxes here. This shows how the river channel changes. Now here's where it gets a bit different. Rather than looking side on, I now want you to imagine that you're standing in the river with the water coming towards you. So in our first box, this is what it looks like in the upper course. That's it. The shape of the river channel is narrow and shallow. Okay, so the river channel in the upper course is narrow and shallow. That's because you don't have much water, because the river in the upper course is lots and lots of different tributaries. Each one of those tributaries doesn't have a very high discharge, so therefore not much erosion happens. And the other thing is that the erosion starts, the direction of erosion is vertical, so the energy pushes down because the river is so steep. So what this means is it becomes quite narrow and the river doesn't erode laterally on the sides, so it stays very narrow. The type of erosion that you get is called vertical erosion. I'll recap that in a moment. Next up, we come to the middle course of the river. So the river channel in the middle course is now starting to get wider and deeper. Okay, so it is wider and deeper. Put this in up here if you like. Wider and deeper. Now what you've got going on here, now because the land has become more gentle, the water's not pushing down so much, the water's pushing sideways or pushing more horizontally. So the type of erosion that you get here is called, let me put it on here somewhere, it's called lateral erosion. So this is lateral erosion making the river wider. Okay? Then finally we get to the lower course of the river. Now here as you can see, the river is now at its widest and deepest. So we're going to write widest and deepest. Now what you find as the river gets to the mouth where it meets the sea, the energy of the water starts to fall. So what you find happening, instead of erosion, vertical or lateral erosion, you find that we have much more deposition, which is where sediment and bits of silt that have been carried by the river, they get dropped off. So there it is. So what we've got, let's do a quick recap. This shows how a river changes from the upper to the middle to the lower course as you go from the source downstream to the mouth. In the upper course, the land is steep, the gradient is steep. Because of this, we have vertical erosion, which means that the river channel is actually narrow and shallow. As we get to the middle course, we find we have lateral erosion because the gradient is more gentle. This means that the river gets wider and deeper. Then finally, in the lower course, the river is at its deepest and widest, and the gradient is more or less flat. As a result of this, we have deposition happening. Let's get rid of it. So using your diagrams or the diagram provided here, I would like you to describe how the profile, by which we mean the long profile which we drew, how does it change along its course? This kind of question is a 3-mark question, but because it is a described question, we do not need to see the word because. There is no explanation required. You are just simply stating the characteristics. And you can actually do it as 3 bullet points. A good way of doing it would be 1 bullet point about the upper, 1 bullet point about the middle, and 1 bullet point about the lower course. Something about the profile and how it changes. So look carefully on this diagram and see which words would be appropriate. Pause the video now. Okay, we could have said the upper course is narrow, shallow, and it has a steep gradient. The middle course, if you remember, the gradient has now become more gentle. It's become wider, it's become deeper. Lastly, the lower course is almost flat. The gradient is almost flat. It is at its widest and deepest at the lower course. So this is where it gets trickier. I'm now asking you to explain how the river's channel characteristics change. The channel characteristics is that, and that is a 4-mark question. So we need to do a detailed explanation. The best way of doing this might be to go back to my video demonstration in my outdoor classroom, and at the end of that video you will see that I provide a summary of how the river's channel characteristics change. If you want to make notes or just study your diagram that you've already drawn, that might help you. Okay, so the answers. In the upper course we have vertical erosion, that's essential, and it was of the river bed. So the channel is narrow and shallow. We could also say that the discharge is low. There's not much water because there's so many tributaries. They're tiny streams. That explains why it's shallow. In the middle course, we start to get lateral erosion of the river banks. So the channel becomes wider and deeper because there's more water, because the discharge is higher. The really important bit for this, guys, is that you've mentioned vertical erosion and lateral erosion. Vertical erosion makes it affects the river bed. Lateral erosion affects the river bank. I haven't included the lower course in here. You might have liked to do that. It's slightly more complicated because we have deposition there. Green pen your work, give yourselves a mark out of 4. You're going to now see 8 figures. It could be a map, it could be a photo, and I would like you to pause the video for each one and decide if the map or the photo is showing you the upper course, the middle course, or the lower course. I also want you to consider, what is the relief like? That word relief means how steep the land is. Is it high up? Is it low down? Is it steep? Is it gentle? Also, how wide is the river channel? And then lastly, what features can you identify? What features can you identify? Number 2 coming up. Here are the answers. Please check and correct. So to end this lesson, I would like you to answer the quiz questions. We actually did exactly the same ones in the previous lesson, so I want you to try and do it without looking back in your notes. Pause the video now. Please check and correct your answers. The next lesson is lesson 3 in the rivers topic, and this is landforms in the upper course, and we're going to find out all about waterfalls and V-shaped valleys. See you then.